Welcome back, everybody. This is something that I at least wasn't expecting to do today, which is welcome back to your daily update on the state of the Malazan Empire, because I managed to start reading Orb Sceptre Throne by Esslemont today. Isn't that fun? Yeah, I actually forced myself this morning, and while I still have issues with concentrating well enough on this stuff, I'm getting there. And I went through the prologue and the first two chapters. We'll see how much of it I'll get done by tomorrow. Who knows? But I figured we'll, do that and see how far we can come. I hope it will not get too dark too soon. I wanted to record earlier, but it was raining and I didn't feel like recording in that mess of a room that I lurk in. I feel lurking is the right word there. Anyway, so I figured we'll do us a little talk about the first two chapters in the prologue of Orb Sceptre Throne, and well, I guess it'll be shorter than the really long discussions of Stonewielder. But then again, I feel my ramblings have gotten longer over the months in any case, so we'll see how this will turn out to be, right? Anyway, let's get started, shall we? Well, cheers. Alright, Orb Sceptre Throne, the fourth of the novels of the Malazan Empire, by Cameron Esslemont, and I feel like for quite a few people it is one of their favourites of the novels of the Malazan Empire. We're going to look at that as well in a bit. And yeah, so what can we expect from it, and where are we, and what do we learn? We're back on Genebakis, more or less completely, except obviously for the Kiska and Leomund storyline, which is still somewhere in the nowhere, I guess. But apart from that, we're on Genebakis. We're even back in Daruzhistan, where we kind of pick up right after Toll the Hounds. So if you have not read Toll the Hounds, this book here will spoil a few things that happen in that book. So once again, I mean, this is a read-along kind of discussion, so I assume that if you're watching this, you either don't care about spoilers or you have already read both Toll the Hounds and Orb Sceptre Throne chapters 1 and 2, for one. So yeah, that's sort of where we pick up. Now that has a lot of interesting differences, that brings a lot of interesting differences with it compared to Stonewielder. Now in Stonewielder, as you know, we had very few Ericsson characters. I want to call them Ericsson characters. I know that's super unfair, because what I mean is characters that were first, like, in publishing order, first presented to us by Stephen Erickson in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. You know, that's people like Malik Rel, people like Lassine, all of those people. And in Stonewielder we had not that many of them, right? We had, and I think he was actually in, well, obviously, no, Teshran isn't even in there. So yeah, Leoman, basically, and a few others, but not that many. Most of them, Iron Bars, yeah, true. But it's very few of them. So it was easy for Cam Esslemont to make his mark compared to earlier books, where a lot of like Stephen Erickson purist fans always get pissed off or whatever, that it's too close, or the old argument that we're not going to get into here. But with this one, after which is the fourth one in like his novel The Malazan Empire, he basically goes square to the place where the Malazan Book of the Fallen started, which is Daruzhistan, and we meet a lot of those iconic characters there. We meet Krupp again, we meet Relic Nom again, we meet all of these people. We meet some of the bridge burners. This is the first time we see Cam Esslemont write about bridge burner characters, among other things, and I personally always really like that, because I feel having two writers that played with these characters for years together write about them is is fascinating because it gives us all kinds of different perspectives, or at least two different perspectives on the same character. I feel it's very, very, very obvious, obviously, when you read both Malik Rel, but especially Lessine or Surly. It's obviously also obvious with Shadow Throne and Dancer or Cotillon. But here we have like a lot of these fan favorites. We have Picker, Blend, Ansi, Duika, whatever his name. That guy, Spindle. We have all of these people showing up again. And the first two chapters of Orb, Sceptre, Throne are very much used to bring us back up to speed, to check in with a lot of these people that we have met before, and introduce a few new ones, but not that many so far. So it's very much about checking in with everyone, seeing where we are, seeing what's going on around the city of Daruzhistan. We learn that is certainly is very much about the city of Daruzhistan. Plus, we have like 3 so far further plot lines, which is the Segula plot line out there. We have the Ansi Moonspawn plot line, which is one of my favorites. And what else do we have? Well, obviously we have the Kiska and Leomund plot line. We have individual things when we check in with Traveler, who is now a monk. Sweeping, which I personally really like. I mean, it's the cliche of all martial arts movies, I feel. So yeah, having that in there, I feel is, what the fuck's going on there? Yes, I do like my neighbors. Anyway, my point is that we have that thing with travel, and we're going to get into that in a second, because I feel it's Esslemont's kind of subtle humor. He's way more direct with his parodies. Well, not parodies, but, poking fun or referencing things than Stephen Erickson is. And I personally appreciate that, because I'm a person who likes pop culture references and jokes. Because, I don't know, I'm a simple mind. I'm a simple person. Well, let's have us a look. We start out with something that I personally really enjoyed, and that is the archaeology bit. Now, we obviously know that both Stephen Erickson and Kem Esslemont have both spent time as archaeologists on archaeological digs, and that really shows in this book, in the plotline with the scholar. And it shows in 2 parts. The first one is the description of the dig out there in the middle of nowhere, having local hired help that is far from, the best you can get. I know for a fact from people that I know in the archaeology sphere that is, depending on where you do your digs, one of the interesting side effects is having local help that may or may not actually help. But we have all of that there. The details of how to do an archaeological dig are there, which once again is one of those things that both Erickson and Esslemont have these facets of their fantasy world where you could suddenly see all their expertise flashing through, right? With Esslemont, those are ships battles, which are fucking amazing, which we saw displayed to the fullest in what's it called, or in Stonewielder, and now we see obviously his expertise with archaeological digs, how they work, how you do that, all the problems therein, the description of architecture and stuff like that, which is something that you need to know as an archaeologist. At least depending on what kind of archaeology you do, you also need a bit of architectural knowledge and shit there, like that. So that in those opening scenes is really, really cool, and just drives home what is going on there. And also the idea of being that mad scholar. Well, I don't want to call him the mad scholar. being an a lone scholar that is convinced of a specific theory and will stake their full career on that, and probably lose a lot, because most of those stay unique and weird theories that never actually fully get explored. If you spend any time in academia, you probably met one or two professors that are exactly like that. That they have like one specific theory that like everyone else is not talking about, because they're still pretty good teachers and you keep them around the institute, but you don't really talk about their one pet theory that is completely out there. Having that shine in there in that depiction is really cool. On the other hand, what he's doing there, digging there, the way he's digging there, also is very reminds me a lot of these like crazy bad archaeologists, archaeological terrorists almost, that we had around, say, the 19th and early 20th century. The kind of people that went and blew up half of Troy to get to that other bit of Troy that they really wanted to go through. Yes, it was one of ours. Schliemann was German, and he actually used explosives to actually get to the ground, which is something a actual trained archaeologist would never ever do. But these people that decide that there is that one old ruin, that biblical ruin, for example, or whatever, out there, and you go there and you do all that crazy shit to prove your theory. Most of the time you get it wrong and you get something else that is maybe more than you bargained for, or something that later generations will appreciate, but you get completely wrong. Will that be the case here? Well, we haven't gotten so far yet, so who knows? The other part that is really important about the archaeology thing here, and we're going to come back to that later on, I promise, is when Evian, is that his name? I keep forgetting his name. Well, you know the drill. I'll take a while for me to get to that, to understand, to remember the names. But when he talks to everyone's favorite, well, not favorite, but everyone's he has to deal with ironmonger, humble measure, who is his financier. And what we have here is another thing that is really interesting, and we'll, as I said, we'll talk about again. And that is archaeology, or digging, or actually large parts of the academic world are chronically underfunded. In the humanities, that is way worse than, say, in the natural sciences, for a bunch of reasons. But even there we have the same issues. You're an academic, what you do is you teach and you research, and 99% of the world don't fucking care about that thing. It's just a fact of life. So what you need to find people to give you money. Now, if you're in the line of science that creates stuff that you can use to blow up shit, or kill people by other means, or maybe cure people, then there's probably some business person out there that is willing to give you money. Maybe even a government, but most likely it's some kind of company that will give you money to perfect your explosives or other weapons or medical thing or whatever. If, however, you're digging up dead stuff, for example, or do philosophy or things like that, it's even harder to find, unless that person that is investing in you has found a way to actually make use of your discoveries. Now, with philosophy, that's kind of difficult, which is why we're even more underfunded than others. With archaeology, there's basically two ways. One of them, obviously, is they hope you dig up shit that they can either, show to all their other rich friends and display in their home museum and never give to anyone, or give to a museum to, gain brownie points or, well, probably symbolic capital, according to Bourdieu. Or they're doing it for political reasons. In any case, as soon as your investors, if you're an academic, as soon as your investors realize that you may be onto something that they can make use of, they will take away as much as possible of that project from you to make use of it. And it's something that we've seen again and again and again, and we kind of see the same going on here when Humble Measure decides that he'll get more workers, get more guards, and so forth, because there's something in there that he wants. Right now, we don't really know what it is that he wants, whether he's hoping for, like, huge amounts of treasure to, I don't know, sell, or, just watch in secrecy and get a boner over that he has them and no one else has them. We don't know yet. We'll talk about that in the future, I guess. But we see that whole thing coming up now. And looking at Humble Measure's activities in Toll the Hounds, he doesn't have that much of a good track record so far. Alright, so we have that whole bit, which I once again find very interesting, and did really like that whole plot line about how archaeology can work or can't work. Motherfuckers. Anyway, is, as I said, like, really well done, and speaks of a lot of experience. So now let's look at the next big thing. Gods, they're getting on my nerves out there. Let's look at the next big thing. The ANSI plotline. Because the ANSI plotline, I feel, has two very important aspects. And we'll see more of it, and it's absolutely a fun thing that will happen later on. What do I mean? The first one is, obviously, ANSI himself as a character. We've seen him as something of a comic relief in Toll the Hounds and also in Memories of Ice. He's always paranoid, he's panicking, people are making fun of him, and so forth. But when we see him now here, he is very much a competent, grizzled veteran. And seeing that serious side of him, I feel, is really helpful, because, it flashes him out in a way that I feel Steven Erikson at the end of Toll the Hound would not really be able to do, because he was focusing so much on that funny side. But, as I said, Cam Esslemont can do that, and Cam Esslemont does it, although we still don't know exactly why ANSI is going out there. So that part we'll talk about later on in the upcoming videos when we have more of ANSI there. But first of all, I just really appreciate him being badass like every other bridge burner, which, like, I feel at the back of our heads we always knew when we were reading Memories of Ice or Toll the Hounds. I mean, we knew that he's a surviving bridge burner, he has to be fucking tough, but he never really showed. Here now we see him being tough. So there's that. The other part, however, that is very, very interesting is the whole setting out there near the spawns, the rest of Moonspawn, because what we have is the rest, the aftermath of a supernatural disaster, by which I mean big chunks of rock falling into the sea, creating islands, and a flood that completely devastated the shoreline. And what Cam Esslemont does here, and what I feel is really interesting and important for a lot of stuff that we'll see later on in the Malazan world, is to draw our attention to the parallels between war and natural disasters. It's something that we'll see once again going on in The God Is Not Willing and in other bits, but it's very much that idea that natural disasters and warfare lead to a general upheaval of order, law and order, and local organizations and structures. And you have two things that happen then. The one thing is great poverty and suffering of, like, most people. The other part is extreme profiteering by people without any principles or morals that jump in and use their force, and whatever else they have to get as much out of there as they can, whether it is, profiteering after a war or a natural disaster, whether it's people that try to, make money in rebuilding in a way that doesn't really work. You have corruption and crime creeping in. I don't know. I'm not naming places right now, but if you look at how we as humanity have dealt with both natural disasters or the aftermath of war in the last couple, I don't know, decades, you know, you can see those parallels, and I feel the strong point that Cam Esslemont makes here, and he makes that point explicitly, and that's something that I appreciate, is to draw the parallel between those two and see war not only as obviously a human-made disaster, which it is, but also on the same level, the same, if not global, then at least regional or whatever level as a natural disaster, with all the same effects on human behavior and the upheavals in society. And that's something that we'll definitely talk about more when we get deeper into the novel, but I just wanted to point it out as one of the huge points of this one. These first two chapters and the prologue. Now, what else should we mention here in the beginning? Well, there is that feeling of upcoming doom that we obviously need in like the openings of any kind of fantasy novel. We need to do at least foreshadow the main threat. Maybe more. So far, it's only foreshadowing. It's just like that feeling that now that Rake's dead, Hood's dead, Traveler's gone, Karsa Orlong's gone, Caladan's Brood's gone out of the city. It's like there's this vacuum, this power vacuum, basically. The Malazans are not actually fully there. They have an embassy with that guy that shows up all the time. One of Sarge Iskar Jarek's favorites. But yeah, apart from that, you have the power vacuum. Even the local guild, the Assassins Guild, with Vorkan taking over a seat on the council. Even the local Assassins Guild is in something of a power vacuum. And we'll see what will try to fill that power vacuum. That's sort of the other like big theme that is built up here, but in a slow way so far. And as I said, we'll get back to more of that, and I'll try to, look at like how specific characters like Krupp and so forth are described here as compared to Stephen Erickson's descriptions, portrayals is more what I want to say, in future videos. One thing, though, that I find really interesting in the difference between their voices as writers is that Cam Esslemont is way more upfront when it comes to making like specific explanations or establish specific characters. It's still far away from like a tell don't show, but he certainly is a bit more open or more flexible on that account, and does, at least with some of the more established characters that we've had before. We get at least a basic introduction that goes beyond like his name is this and that, and we see that like fairly well with Fisher, whom we obviously met before, and we see that with a bunch of others as well, as like, yeah, these are these characters. This is like the very short, so we know who they are. This is how they look, and this is another thing that I just realized because I'm stupid, but Cam Esslemont is way more detailed when it comes to appearance, to description of appearance of characters, which Stephen Erickson is very, very, very careful to not supply too much of. Skin color, hair color, stuff like that. I mean, with some you kind of get it, but with some it takes forever to actually get any form of description of character. Cam Esslemont is way more upfront with that as well, which, is fine. What else? Oh yeah, the Segula plotline. It's an interesting one. So far, I've always had issues with the Segula, and those are basically that I have always had issues, and those are merely, and I'm aware that this is mostly, like almost completely, well, I guess it's completely my fault, but I've had a lack of interest in anything that is modeled after any kind of martial arts culture in general. I'm not interested in Japanese media. I've read well, I've read Murakami and didn't like it, and I've never watched any anime or read any mangas and stuff. And this is a culture that is far away from my personal interests, and the Segula, the way they are described with their like adherence to discipline, honor, and all this stuff, or they're obviously very much their own thing, and there's parallels to all kinds of other cultures in there as well. But that's sort of the overtone that I get, and I don't know. They're too disciplined for me. Too much about ambition and getting there and being the best at their stuff, and I'm too sloppy for that, I guess, in general. And so I've never had that much of an interest in the Segula, but this is the first time, and this is also interesting and important, this is the first time we actually get an insight, we get actually a point of view character that is a Segula. Or so we see how the hierarchy works, and that there is that whole like background that they are there in exile, and there is their whatever history they have that they're reclaiming or not reclaiming. We'll see about all of that in the coming coming chapters and coming videos. But so I appreciate that. I do appreciate that. Even though it's not my favorite plot line. We'll see how that will change over time, but so far, there's people on an island that do sword fights as much as they can. And obviously, both Cam Esslemont and Stephen Erickson know their sword fighting. They know their fencing, which is another one of those expertise where you can tell. I feel with fight scenes in general, you can very much tell if people know how to do them or have actual personal experience at fencing or not. Fritz Leiber knows how to fence. You can tell. Stephen Erickson knows how to fence. Neil Stevenson at this point knows how to fence. Other authors, not so much. And you can tell that Jack Vance is also someone who has at least read about fencing. Cam Esslemont also knows about how sword fights or fighting works, so that's nice. Joe Abercrombie doesn't know shit about fighting. He knows how to describe really interesting fights that look cool. But that's about it. Same goes for Richard K. Morgan and some of the others. Anyway, my point is, the martial arts stuff just doesn't really grip me that much, so we'll see how that will be in the future. So, what have I missed? Oh yeah, one huge thing, and I don't know, it's already getting dark, but one huge thing. Kiska, the demons, racism, the lot. Now, I've said this before in my Midnight Heights videos, and Ruth and Bud has made an individual video about it, and it's stated even more explicitly here in the whole plot line in the Vitter. We're going to talk about the Vitter more. I mean, that's really cool to have the Vitter come back. It's something that we know from the Carcanas trilogy, if we have read it. So to see the Vitter be back again in some form, maybe get more explanation about it, really cool. Especially since it's called like the source of life or whatever. So I'm wondering if the name Vitter is connected to that Latin root of vital, whatnot. Who knows? But that's not my main point. My point is we have that person who we don't know yet who he is. But can guess who's helping that demon out of the Vitter and is protecting these demons. It's like, yeah, we know here in this realm you're free from the predations of mages in the warrens, just like enslave demons to do their will. Here you're free of that shit. And so we have that, and then later on when we have Kiska, who is now obviously has a thing going with Leomund of the Flades. And may I just say how much I love the whole thing about her being annoyed with the mustache. I'm not saying I've ever been in that situation, but it's really cool that she's pissed off by the mustache, and he's very much in love with his mustache. I do very much like that as a small random detail. But my main point here is that when they come to that cave with the demons near the end of chapter 2, you have that whole idea that they decide, they're basically the invaders here, and they decide to fight and claim that the other side, the demons, have attacked them, which once again comes to that main point. It's like, in a world like the Malazan, which does not have what you might call your Dungeons and Dragons based idea of alignment, where people are objectively evil or whatever. The question is like, what differentiates a demon from a human being apart from shape? And is shape enough reason to hate or do anything to that person? The answer is obviously no, but we do it anyway. And because it's so easy to think of demons as the other, it's easier to, square that with our like fucked up morals. And that whole conversation that Kiska and Leoman have with the demons, like who's attacking whom here, and who's defending whom here, and who thinks who is hostile here, shows that to an astonishing level compared to a lot of other fantasy books. So I really appreciated that scene in its shortness, because it just like drives the point home. It's like and that's exactly how we deal in our lives with people that look different from us, right? Whether it's skin color, or other parts of our like outward appearance or culture that seem very different from ours, and then we like, yeah, well, they're other, which is sort of the problem, the othering there. So yeah, that's another one that we'll get back to in the future, I guess. And now that it starts to rain in earnest and gets really dark, I'll end it for today. I'm personally just really happy that I finally got my ass up to actually start over Sceptre Throne again. I loved it the first time round. I'm sure I'll love it again this time round, and I'll be back tomorrow with more of it. Until then, cheers.